Hi everyone and welcome to episode 7 of Stacks of Questions. Tonight we're going to change up a little bit, and instead of our normal introducing ourselves, what we're going to do instead is we're going to tell a little story of what's happened at school today or at work today, just to change it up. So Morag, why don't you start for us?
Well, the most interesting thing today for me was primary 2 art lesson, stained glass art in the style of Charles Rennie Mackintosh. And we all had to make little roses, and it was very, very pretty on acetates. And then they got them laminated and it'll become wall art. There
Very
you go.
cool.
Over to you, Colin.
Mine's not nearly as creative. We found out this week that HMI are coming to visit us just after the February holiday, so that's exciting times at my work.
I think that you've definitely pulled the short straw here, Colin. My exciting thing for today was that one of my third years did an end of unit assessment for programming, and I didn't have very much hope for her end score because in the surname box on the front of her paper, she wrote the word surname. But incidentally, she did end up getting an A, so I must be doing something right in the classroom. So let's crack on with today's chat. So over the last 3 weeks, we've been looking at sort of some of the big questions that came back from the Stacks conference at the end of last year. And I've graded out all the ones we've done over the last few weeks. So we thought we'd challenge maybe another 2 or 3 of these tonight, see how we get on, have a little look at some of the questions before we go on to tonight's big challenge. So are you guys okay if I spin the wheel and we'll get started?
Totally, go for it.
Awesome. Okay, so starting off with tonight, we are looking at question 12. Should I teach pupils about command words and how can they be used to help pupils structure their answers? Can I start this one? Because we did, obviously, last year in the assessment stuff that we were doing as part of the assessment team, a big part of that, what we did was on command words. And because we were doing it at the time, I went back and did a kind of Bloom's taxonomy sort of like lesson, I suppose, with my higher kids. And I've never ever taught something that the kids come back to and ask me about so many times. This year, a lot of them have went on to advanced higher. It's almost the same class. I've went on to advanced higher, and they come back to me now, even as advanced higher students, and say, oh, when we were doing that triangle thing, because obviously they don't call it Bloom's taxonomy, when we were doing that triangle thing, do you remember how we were talking about how the really hard questions were the explain and the analyze, and is that the same as at advanced higher? And it's really stuck with them. So I would have said that something in the past that I've not spent a lot of time talking about. You do the obvious, like a state is a 1-mark question, things like that, and don't need to put it in sentences and stuff, especially for the kids who struggle with that, you know, a dyslexia on ASN. But I think it's actually really important and something we should maybe embed further down the school. What have you guys found the same, or did you do any of the kind of specific teaching of it last year? What are you calling?
So I've never explicitly taught it, but I'm very conscious of first and second year resources, like even starters and stuff. I'll use the command words. I'll have like state this or explain that. And I don't ever go into detail about why, but just in terms of kind of almost by osmosis, so that all their homeworks are written in an SQA style with a command word, that hopefully they're getting to the point where it's just embedded in what they do and how they answer questions. However, marking the advanced higher prelim, and there was a describe question and a kid wrote 2 words, and you're like, oh, this is stuck well then. Good, excellent.
Yeah, I think that's that. I tended to use command words or focus on them more when it was appropriate, when we were doing things like preparation for exams, preparation for prelim, and then really focus on the ones that were, I would say, more focus would be describe versus explain, and really what was going on there and what was the difference between the two, because what I found was a lot of kids didn't understand there was a difference. So description answer is almost like a rote learned factual answer, whereas the explanation, they're needing to explain, they're needing to say why something is happening or why something occurred with a supporting fact, and having to give that level of detail. And then of course in your triangle, I like that approach to it, that triangle thing, that triangle lesson you did, I like that. I think then it becomes difficult harder when they're doing things like comparisons, or when they're doing analysing things and they're asked to evaluate between 2 solutions, that type of thing. So yeah, I think it is important. I've never really laboured at those, but it's interesting to hear what you said, Kim, that the kids did respond to it and actually
Yeah.
appreciated it.
I think as well, like, I don't know. I know certainly when I'm making, and this is maybe again going down to the BG and preparing the kids for moving up the school, I am really aware of when I put assessments together of trying to make sure I've got problem solving style questions, and the style of questions is very similar to that they would come across at, say, National 4 or National 5. But I don't know if I use the terminology, and I don't know whether you naturally, maybe more naturally, do that, Colin, because of you guys haven't been question writers before. It's interesting. Like, I've never thought about it till now, and I probably could go back and look at some, and maybe I've not. Maybe I've said what rather than state. Do you know? Because I'm not a fay with question writing, which you maybe are. So it'd be interesting, actually, if anybody else who does question writing, who listens, might be able to tell us whether they do the same or not. Because I think that's something that's really useful. And you're right, by osmosis, even just them seeing those words and then maybe getting more explanation. Do you think that at BGE we should have more of the describe and the compare sort of questions to kind of give you the A mark questions, if you like, in assessments, or do you tend to keep most of them state?
It's good to, like, see, as a starter, if you have like a state question and then a describe question and then an explain question, and you say, right, pick the question you want to answer. So it's kind of differentiated, and everybody can at least have a go at the state, and then your better kids are maybe going to have a go at explaining something. I think certainly the time I learnt most about command words was when I was in a faculty, and business management are all over their command words. And the problem that we had was that sometimes a computing command word didn't quite match with a business management command word. And if you're in a kind of shared course and you're using a command word that has a different meaning in business management, they get a bit upset about that. But that was only a minor pitfall I came across in.
We actually did a whole school activity on that, like a whole school activity on command words, and actually the amount of terminology that kids needed to know across the whole school is quite frightening. You know, like across the whole SQA of the command words that were used. So it's an interesting topic, but I think that the more we bring it down into the BGE or further down, the easier it becomes for our kids to differentiate between them. And I really like the idea of, like, almost like the chili challenge for anything, of having the 3 different levels for differentiation. Okay, let's move on to question 2. Well, whatever question's going to come up next. It might be 2. Who knows? It is question 3. How can I prepare pupils for the course assignment? We did a lot of this last week. What do we think? Anything different to add that we didn't cover already?
I mean, from my point of view, it starts early doors. Like, my third year class are just finishing databases. So they're going to do a database practical assessment and a database written assessment. So I've got evidence of both. And the practical assessment's in 2 parts. You do the design, you hand it in, and you don't get it back. And then I'm giving you the completed data dictionary, just like it would be for SQA. And they've done the same or similar for a web unit. They'll do the same for programming. And then once we get past the prelim, there's a bank of 7 now, kind of past papers, and it's just work through as many of them as you can, because you start to get the pattern, you start to get a feel for it, you start to get a kind of understanding of the things that tend to come up. Like, your National 5 program will always have validation, and it will always have an array in it, and your higher program will always have file handling in it and at least one of the algorithms in it. And the kids themselves start to spot that and then go, wait a minute, this isn't too bad. And also, the more of the assignments that they do, the bigger a bank of resources that they can look back on in their open book assessments to kind of go and check answers or go and see how they did it previously.
Yeah, I did it in my classroom yesterday, how I tackle, because I think that for the kids, and we're all guilty of this when we're really busy and we've got a big class, you know, of when the kids will say to you, can I have some help, or I can't work out what's wrong with this program. And with the best will in the world, you can be the teacher who wants to sit down with every single kid and work through it with them and help them really understand where you went wrong. But a lot of the time you just say, you missed a comma there, put it in, and it'll work. You know, we all do that. So what I did yesterday was how I tackle it. So what I did is I just opened up a random assignment and let the kids pick one. I hadn't looked at the assignments for, since last year. And I was like, pick one, and I'll show you how I go about taking the design and put into Visual Basic. Now, at this stage, they've all done software. We've been working through databases last while, so it's not super fresh in their head. But I was like, I want to tell you how I tackle it, because I think everyone starts programming differently. So I was like, I will start with the main algorithm and I get it all set up. And we use Visual Basic. So I was like, I get it all set up first. And then the next thing I do is move on to, right, I'm going to put all my actual parameters in. Then I'm going to go put all my formal parameters in, and I was showing them how I build up and how I do the problem solving. And when something wasn't working, I would deliberately like put a wee mistake in somewhere or something. And sometimes real mistakes, I would say to them, like, so I'm going to put this in here to make sure this works. Or I was showing them how I would put a bit of code in to make sure that the file handling, like reading from the file, works. But I'm not going to delete that. I'm just going to like display it in the list box just to show me if it's read in or not, just to try and get them used to, like, how do I check these individual bits? It's something really interesting happened with my class next door. One of my colleagues was teaching, and he was like, I had this girl doing a higher database assignment, and she couldn't get all 3 of her queries or whatever she was doing to work. And he said, just put all the queries on a Word document, print out as if it was the SQA. You've not got any output, fine, print it. And she had 3 out of 4 marks for every single query she'd done, but nothing worked. She was like, in real life, you could have just binned that whole thing. But because she'd went to the effort printing off, he was able to talk her through, well, actually, if you'd done that for every single question, you'd get 75%, which is an A. Do you know what I mean? But so don't just bin it off because it's not working or you're not getting the result you think of, or just give up. You might as well put down what you've got, because actually, if you've got the equijoin, you've got this or you've got that, you're gonna gather some marks. So how I do it, like, I would try to show them how I do the logic in my brain, especially if I've got a few kids in my class who just struggle a wee bit more with the software part. And I think that was really helping them. And they were like, oh gosh, this has all come back to me so much easier than when we were trying to do practice assignments back in December, sort of thing. So that's one of the things I do. What about you, Morag? Anything any different? Been a while since you've been
Yeah, not in primary 2 art. No, I think the most important thing to do is start making them independent as early as you can, and giving them that practice of completing practical tasks, sort of like Colin said, like a database end of assessment, practical under exam conditions, in the same way that they'll have to tackle it for the assignment. When it's just focused on database, they know what it's focused on. They've had lots of practice when you've been able to help them or point them in direction, or correct errors, that type of, or hint at them to help them correct the errors. And they've had lots of practice over the previous couple of weeks. So when they're actually very focused, it should therefore it's a really good opportunity to take and give them that experience of what open book is like. You can look at any of the resources, but I cannot help you.
Yeah.
Off you go and do it. And you've got a limited amount of time. And I think that's probably the most important skill you can actually do for them. And don't leave it until the assignment and the first time they do it.
Yeah, I was like, oh, I can't remember how to do a line input for this file. So rather than asking me, because I can't ask the teacher, where am I going to find that out? So you tell me what file I would open to get it and that sort of thing. So definitely. Okay, let's see if we've got time to fit in one more question. Spin the spinner. Last question is question number 2. All the questions will be quite close together, haven't they? So 2, how can I create valid questions for tests such as end of topic tests, practical assessment tasks, and prelim papers? Oh boy, this is one of the ones that I feel like is hard to answer because I'm not a writer and you guys find this a lot more natural than I do. And I think a lot more people will be in my shoes than you guys' shoes. So what do we think? How do we make sure they're valid? Command words is obviously a good one too, that we talked about already.
Yeah. I suppose it depends on your understanding of the word valid, what makes a valid question. But if we're talking about valid in terms of SoQ or Qualification Scotland, then we should be looking at the specifications documents because it's there in chapter and verse. The problem is it's there in so many different sections of the document that you have to keep going through to find exactly what you need. It's not all clear cut on one page. But last session in our first episode, we focused on what makes questions valid for SQA purposes and what therefore learners could expect to see in a question and are the structure of question papers. And so that has a lots of detail about it, but it's about getting the balance, about like having 30% of the questions are at A level and 50% of the questions are at C level, and that's what that should be part of a test, certainly a test, an end topic test, not perhaps a homework test, but certainly even in practical assessments and prelim papers, that kind of leveling, and also making sure that the balance is correct as well, that you're getting balance, you're getting coverage of analysis, design, implementation, testing, evaluation. It's not all implementation marks. That's important as well, that we have to, as writers, we're always looking for design questions, always looking for design.
Yeah. Also think as well, like even just the order, there's just silly wee things that I didn't realize about until working with you guys, like the order of the fact that it should flow from analysis down to evaluation is something really simple, and not having any question marks and all that sort of stuff. It's very simple, actually, but lots of things people should know. So if you haven't, I would encourage anybody who's not been and looked at the assessment videos from last year, really, really good place to start as to where to go, for the looking at the SQA rubric and how to build up. They're probably more for prelim papers. What about practical assignments, Colin? Do you make up any of your own practical assignments?
Yeah, I mean, lots of kind of practical tasks that you can just sort of flesh out to be assignments. As Morag says, like the implementation stuff is normally the stuff that you jump to, so you've got to try and like work back and say, right, well, what would be the analysis, and then what type of analysis question am I asking? Am I asking for inputs, process, outputs, or am I asking for functional requirements if it's web or databases? And then having that kind of notion that you can either do the analysis and design part on one stem and then change to a completely different stem for your implementation, or do it like SQA and say, right, give me that bit in and I'm going to give you the answer that you can then go and implement. I always find the testing questions for practical assignments are quite hard, because you've got to give them something that they can test, even if their program's absolute nonsense, so that you're not kind of excluding those marks. And then evaluation, well, that was last week. Was that last episode, the episode before? How we improve evaluation. And yeah, I think there's still a bit of work to be done. It's not just a rote answer of I've used input validation or I used an array. What do you do?
Yeah, and I also think sometimes, what I was going to say is that sometimes people think of these 3 tasks, end of topic test, practical assessment tasks, as one big, huge task that they have to create. But I think it was really powerful what Maggie said when she was on, and she said that actually she uses quite a lot of like maybe just the evaluation task or maybe just the analysis task from a past assignment as a starter question, or drip fed into a little bit of her work, putting the context in there. And actually that would be quite easy to change or to swap. Swap the scenario or swap the stem, if you know what I mean. And you could easily do that without it having to be this huge, big thing. Obviously, you wouldn't necessarily be able to use it as a practice assignment as a whole, but I think even just for teachers, the practice of then making those changes on a smaller scale maybe makes creating a bigger one a little bit less scary, perhaps. Okay, cool. So 3 questions on. Let's move on to this week's challenge. Okay, so this week we're doing a similar challenge to the last 2 weeks. We're again going to try and create a wee 5-minute class task that's going to help your kids improve for their assignment. And we want to focus this week on design. So the last couple of weeks we've done analysis and evaluation. So today we want to look at design. So because there's just the 3 of us, let's work out who is going for each team. So going for the red team this week, we have got Colin. I can't remember who was doing what teams last week, so we're all over the place. And for the blue team this week, we've got Morag. Look at me smiling. I've got a bit of mischievous up my mind. I'm thinking that we've been going a little bit easy over the last few weeks, and there's been quite a lot of opportunity to do some software stuff. So I'm thinking as an additional challenge, how do you guys feel about having to pick, I'll be kind, having to pick one of the optional units for your design? What do you think? Up for the challenge?
Yeah, let's go for it. Yeah, why not? Let's go for it.
Awesome.
I'll do web if you want, just because it's design.
Okay, let me do web versus databases.
Yeah.
Okay.
Colin, you okay for database? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll do something database.
Okay, right. Your time starts now. Okay, guys, that's time up. So let's stop there and we'll go over your creations. I think it's over to the red team first. Is that you, Colin?
Yes, it is. So I had databases.
Here we go.
So my scenario was a gym uses a relational database to store details of classes it runs and the instructors who leads them. Sample data is shown below, and so there's a class table with a class name, a day, a start time, the number of minutes, the class ID, and the instructor number. And then there's a second instructor table with a first name, surname, instructor number, full time, and hourly rate. So the question is, draw the entity relationship diagram to represent this relational database, and we're going for the full Boona here. So your diagram should include entities, attributes, key fields, and cardinality.
Fantastic. Okay, cool. And Morag, will we go on to yours?
Okay, so I'm the switchboard. Okay, so I have the web, and I've gone for hire. And Colin will recognise the scenario. Been a while since you've come across it, Colin. Cakery bakery. So I've given you a choice of 2 tasks, Kim, because I thought I would be generous. So we've got an order for celebration cakes using an HTML form. Customers are required to, and then there's a list of requirements, like enter their name, enter the email address, select the type of celebration cake. And there's a list of celebration cakes, enter the number of tiers that they require from 1 to 3, and type the personalised message that they want to be iced on top of the cake, up to 50 characters. And the question is to design a wireframe to show how the form could be designed, and it should show validation. The alternative to that is following on from Cakery Bakery, and they're going to have a multi-level navigational structure, which is a bit of a mouthful, with a home page, a horizontal navigation bar linking 4 main pages: birthday cakes, seasonal cakes, driving test cakes. I was struggling for something, folks, and place order, which of course is where the HTML form would be. And then there's details of, in the birthday cakes, there will be 2 subpages. The seasonal cake will have 4 subpages. And the autumn page itself, which is a subpage, will have 2 further subpages. So to design a multi-level navigational structure for this website, clearly showing navigational bar and associated, I think that says pages, but I was running out of vertical space, I think. So there you go, Kim. 2 higher options for you.
That's very good. I like the fact that that's got a little bit of something and then an extension and the validation. And then Collins has got another one. Okay, so we've got a national file database one versus a higher web one. I think in this instance, I'm going to have to go with the blue team, and not just because the Cakery Bakery Morag looked very lovely in its layout with the little emojis, but just because I like the fact that there was 2 options and the kids had something else to do to level up or to give them something extra to work on while the first ones were working out how to do a form. Probably a bigger task maybe than a starter. Colin, yours was fab for a starter though, I think. Okay, so should we go across to the scores and the doors? Okay, so that means that this week the blue team are catching up, now on 2 points, following up the red team, who are on 5 points. Very well done to both of you, because you came up with really good ideas. So good job, you guys. And hopefully, if you're going to join us next time, we're going to be introducing one of our new guest judges to come along and have a little chat about all things preparing for the exam. So hope to see you guys there. Thank you very much for joining me both.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, an absolute pleasure, Kim, as always.
Fabulous. And I'll see you guys next time. Speak to you later. Bye.